If you look closely at the modern landscape of the National Football League, you start to notice a very clear, very calculated pattern. There is a specific, highly engineered, multi-million-dollar machine designed to produce today's biggest sports stars. Usually, these guys are born right into the center of that system. I mean, think about it. They have private running back gurus and personal speed trainers by the time they are 10 years old. Their families fly them across the country to elite, invitation-only summer camps. Their high school highlight tapes are professionally edited with drone footage before they even have a driver's license. For a lot of these guys, they have a perfectly paved, heavily funded golden pathway leading them straight to the pros. But Jahmyr Gibbs? Let me tell you right now, Jahmyr Gibbs isn't supposed to be here. Jahmyr wasn't born into a system that produces superstars. He was born into pure, raw, unforgiving survival.
My homeboys at home, my cousins, sometimes they'll do stuff and I would want to go with them. They say, nah, we know what you can be, what you can become, so now you stay over here.
Today, we all know him as one of the most electrifying, terrifyingly fast playmakers in the NFL. When he touches the football, you literally hold your breath because you know he might take it 80 yards. But the story of how Jahmyr Gibbs actually got to the league, it isn't really a story about football at all. It is a deeply human, incredibly emotional story about a kid who had absolutely nowhere to go and somehow, miraculously, ran his way home. Let's just be completely, brutally honest about where this journey begins. It doesn't start under the bright Friday night lights with cheering crowds and marching bands. It starts in Dalton, Georgia, with a quiet, deeply introverted kid whose everyday life was a revolving door of absolute chaos and instability.
And Jahmyr, man, you come from homelessness. Your grandmother, you obviously, the story's well documented.
Raised primarily by his grandmother, Angela Willis, Jahmyr simply didn't have the luxury of a normal childhood. He didn't have a permanent address. He didn't have a childhood bedroom with posters on the wall. There were long, incredibly stressful nights where he and his grandmother literally had no place to sleep. They had to rely on a local shelter system through an organization called Family Promise, a community group that steps in to help struggling families just find a baseline of survival. I want you to really put yourself in his shoes for a second. Think about what it feels like to be a kid, walking into a shelter, the embarrassment, the fear. Family Promise helped Jahmyr and his grandmother with the absolute bare minimum. A warm meal, some decent clothing, and a safe place to lay their heads for just a few weeks at a time before they had to pack up their bags and move again. Now, I want you to really think about the heavy, psychological toll that takes on a young boy. Think about the suffocating pressure of the streets calling your name when you feel like you have absolutely nothing to lose. Jahmyr had friends. He had cousins in his own neighborhood who were making bad decisions, doing things that could have easily derailed his life forever. And let's be real here, it would have been so incredibly easy for him to just follow them. When you have absolutely nothing, the streets are always there, waiting with open arms to offer you something. But even at that young age, Jahmyr possessed a terrifying amount of mental discipline. People in his neighborhood looked at him and told him, "We know what you can be. We know what you can become. Stay over here. Stay out of trouble." And the craziest part? He actually listened. He actively chose to walk away from the noise, the temptation, and the quick money. While he and his grandmother were staying at that shelter, they met a female volunteer named Dusty Ross. At the time, it was just a brief passing interaction between the Ross family and this quiet, homeless kid who kept his head down. Nobody in that room knew it yet, but that brief, chance meeting planted a tiny seed that would completely alter the trajectory of Jahmyr's entire life. Through all of this off-the-field chaos, through the evictions and the shelters, the game of football became Jahmyr's only true sanctuary. It was the one single thing in his life that actually made sense. The one thing he could depend on when everything else around him was constantly falling apart. The field was exactly 100 yards long, no matter where he slept the night before. When he got to Dalton High School, he earned a reputation very quickly. But it wasn't for being flashy. It wasn't for being an arrogant star athlete demanding the ball. He became known for his absolute, unbreakable silence. He rarely talked. He literally never complained about a drill, a hit, or the heat. He just worked.
All right. running back Jahmyr Gibbs had 250 rushing yards by halftime of last Friday's game at Ringgold. Coach Matt Land said that's when he knew something special was happening.
His high school coaches started noticing this kid who was always the first one to show up at the facility. He was getting extra reps in early in the morning, putting in the grueling work in the weight room, even when the coaches themselves had absolutely no idea where he had slept the night before. He hid his struggle. He didn't want pity. He just wanted to play. But before he could even have his massive, breakout high school season, the harsh reality of his living situation came crashing down on him again. He had nowhere to go. He needed a place to stay. That is when the family of Dalton's senior quarterback, a kid named JP Tighe, stepped in. During the grueling 2017 preseason workouts, JP and Jahmyr formed a really deep, unspoken bond. As the summer dragged on and the heat cranked up, Jahmyr started spending more and more time hanging out at the Tighe household. After a few nights of him just crashing on the couch and not wanting to leave, the family realized the gravity of his situation. They looked at this quiet kid and realized he didn't have a safety net. If he walked out their front door, he was walking into nothing. So they pulled him aside and simply asked if he wanted to stay for good. They opened their doors and threw him a literal lifeline. Now, it wasn't meant to be a permanent, forever solution, but for the first time in a very long time, it was a place where Jahmyr Gibbs could just stop constantly looking over his shoulder. He didn't have to worry about where his next meal was coming from. He could just breathe. But here's the heartbreaking thing about high school. It doesn't last forever. When that football season ended and his quarterback graduated and moved on, Jahmyr was once again staring down the exact same terrifying question that had haunted his entire childhood. Where do I go now? Do I go back into the shelter system? Am I homeless again? And that is exactly when the universe brought everything full circle. He crossed paths with Greg and Dusty Ross again, the exact same family he had met years earlier while living in that homeless shelter. They saw a kid with a pure heart who just needed a fighting chance. So, at 15 years old, a time when most teenagers are just worrying about driving tests, video games, and prom, Jahmyr Gibbs was officially adopted by the Ross family. I really, truly want you to pause and think about the profound emotional weight of that moment. For the very first time in his entire life, he had his own bed. He had a stable, loving family, he had a permanent roof over his head, and most importantly, he had a real reason to believe that things were actually going to get better. With his daily survival finally secured, his mind was free. He could finally focus entirely on what he did best, destroying opposing defenses.
Show respect, no small talk, just motion. This a lifestyle, not a moment. After hours we don't slow.
With a stable home life finally anchoring him, Jahmyr's raw, pent-up talent absolutely exploded. It was like watching a caged animal finally get let out. But the moment that truly put him on the national map wasn't even a game that his team won.
For the second time in 6 years, a local prep football team will play on national television. This fall, it's Dalton's turn as the Catamounts have a date booked with ESPN2. Harrison, of course, is led by the nation's top overall recruit, quarterback Justin Fields. There he is right there.
It was a highly anticipated nationally televised matchup on ESPN2 against Harrison High School. Now, Harrison High was led by a guy you might have heard of, the undisputed #1 overall recruit in the entire country, a quarterback named Justin Fields. All the television cameras, all the elite college scouts in their polo shirts, and all the national hype were in the stadium that night specifically to watch Justin Fields. But Jahmyr Gibbs, he completely, unapologetically stole the show. In a brutally tight, gritty football game, Jahmyr put his entire team on his back, rushing for 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was completely unguardable. Even though Dalton High narrowly lost the game 2-8, 2-6, the damage was already done. When those elite college recruiters packed up their clipboards to leave that night, they weren't just talking about Justin Fields anymore. They were all pointing down at the field, frantically flipping through their programs, and asking each other, who in the world is the kid wearing #1? What happened next completely changed Jahmyr's life overnight. The floodgates swung wide open. Recruiters from massive Power 5 schools began swarming the small town of Dalton, Georgia. This quiet, introverted kid who used to sleep in a homeless shelter suddenly held 28 different Division I scholarship offers. We're talking about the absolute heavy hitters of college football calling his phone day and night. Ohio State, LSU, the University of Florida, Alabama. He followed up that hype with a senior season that looked like somebody playing a video game on the easiest difficulty. He rushed for over 2,500 yards. He scored 40 touchdowns. He was out there averaging nearly 9 yards every single time he touched the football. He shattered school records left and right and was universally named Player of the Year. When it came time to make a decision, he actually leaned incredibly heavily toward Ohio State. He admitted later that he was this close to committing to the Buckeyes, but in a move that shocked a lot of recruiting analysts across the country, he decided to stay close to home. He committed to Georgia Tech. It is not every day that a 4-star top 1-0 running back in the entire country chooses a rebuilding Georgia Tech program over the absolute blue bloods of college football. But as we already know, Jahmyr Gibbs has never been one to just follow the crowd. When Gibbs arrived in Atlanta in 2020, Georgia Tech was not exactly a college football powerhouse. They were in the middle of a massive, painful multi-year rebuild. The offense constantly struggled to move the ball. The offensive line couldn't hold their blocks. The team lost, and they lost a lot. But through all of that organizational chaos on the field, one thing was blindingly obvious to anyone who actually turned on the game tape. Jahmyr Gibbs was an absolute superstar trapped inside a broken system. Over his 2 seasons there, he literally became their entire offense. When the offensive line completely whiffed on their assignments, Jahmyr would casually make 3 guys miss in the backfield and turn a guaranteed 5-yard loss into a first down. When the play completely broke down, he just relied on his pure survival instincts and found daylight anyway. He led the entire team in rushing. He led the team in total yards. But the losses just kept piling up. It takes a toll on a competitor. So, after 2 years of absolute individual brilliance hidden behind deeply frustrating team records, Gibbs faced a massive career crossroads. Does he stay loyal to a program that simply doesn't have the offensive line to showcase his talent? Or does he take a massive leap of faith and bet on himself? He chose to bet on himself. Jahmyr entered the transfer portal and announced he was heading to the absolute pinnacle, the absolute mountaintop of college football, the University of Alabama. Now, a lot of casual fans on Twitter shrugged this off as just another star running away to a stacked team to get an easy ring. But for Gibbs, this was never, ever about seeking attention or taking the easy way out. It was about challenging himself to the absolute limit. At Georgia Tech, he had learned how to survive on a chaotic football field. But at Alabama, he wanted to prove he truly belonged among the elite. And let me tell you, the adjustment to Tuscaloosa is not easy for anyone. It's Alabama. There are 5-star freak-of-nature athletes sitting on the 3rd string. The expectations under Nick Saban were completely suffocating. Every single practice felt like a high-stakes NFL Combine tryout. Every dropped pass, every missed blocking assignment was magnified under a brutal, unforgiving microscope. But this is exactly where Jahmyr's dark, difficult past became his ultimate superpower. Think about it for a second. He had already lived through actual homelessness. He had lived through real instability, real-world uncertainty, and real deep-rooted doubt. So, a bad football practice? A coach yelling in his face about a missed read? The pressure of a primetime SEC game against a ranked opponent? None of that scared him, because he had already survived the absolute worst life had to offer. Football pressure was nothing. It was a privilege. And when the stadium lights came on, he was absolutely devastating. In 2002, he put up over 1,300 all-purpose yards. He instantly became Heisman-winning quarterback Bryce Young's most trusted, reliable safety valve. He wasn't a giant, bruising, 240-pound back like Derrick Henry or Najee Harris. He was something entirely different. He was a sleek, versatile Swiss Army knife weapon who was a legitimate home run threat every single time the ball grazed his hands. After putting his incredible, undeniable versatility on film against the best, fastest defenses in the country, he made the call. He officially declared for the 2003 NFL Draft. This brings us to draft night. And let's just be completely, brutally honest about the reaction when the Detroit Lions used the 12th overall pick on Jahmyr Gibbs. It was incredibly mixed. And by mixed, I mean TV analysts completely lost their minds on live television. Grown men in suits were literally shaking their heads in disbelief. Fans were screaming on social media, threatening to cancel their season tickets. Draft pundits called it a massive reach. They called it a belly flop. They screamed into their microphones that you simply do not draft a running back that high in the modern NFL, because the analytics nerds say it's the least valuable position on the field. It was deja vu all over again for Jahmyr. He had heard this exact same doubt his entire life. He's too small, he's too quiet, he's too different. He doesn't fit the mold. But what the screaming analysts on TV and the angry fans on Twitter completely failed to realize in that moment was that this wasn't just a mathematical football transaction. It was actually incredibly, deeply poetic. Just look at the Detroit Lions. Look at the city of Detroit, a gritty, tough, working-class city that had to physically and emotionally rebuild itself from the absolute ashes. A football franchise that had been the laughingstock of the league for decades, desperate for a shred of respect, desperate to prove they belonged. And then look at Jahmyr Gibbs, a quiet, overlooked kid who had to rebuild his own life from absolutely nothing. Both were totally misunderstood. Both were incredibly, undeniably resilient. General manager Brad Holmes and head coach Dan Campbell didn't just draft a running back based on a spreadsheet or a positional value chart. They drafted a human being who was a perfect living mirror of their own city story.
I know you told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong.
And the Lions were proven absolutely right. Jahmyr's rookie season started a little slow as the coaching staff purposely eased him into the brutal speed of the NFL. But by mid-season, he completely exploded. He was out there averaging over 5 yards per carry against grown men. He was breaking tackles, catching passes out of the backfield, and bringing a terrifying electric spark to the Detroit offense that the city hadn't seen in years. But if you watched him closely, if you looked at his face right after he scored a touchdown, or when he was just standing quietly on the sideline taking it all in, you could see this profound humility in how he carried himself. Because for him, stepping onto that NFL field was never just about the money or the fame or the fantasy football stats. It was about completing the circle. The kid who once stared at the ceiling of a homeless shelter, genuinely wondering where he would sleep the next night, was now living out his wildest dreams in front of 65,000 screaming people. The kid who bounced from couch to couch feeling like a burden had finally permanently found a place where he truly belonged. There is a certain beautiful poetry to the Jahmyr Gibbs story. It is a rhythm between absolute chaos and lasting peace, between profound unfair loss and ultimate redemption. And what makes his story truly remarkable isn't just the rushing yards or the massive NFL contracts. It's what he has actively chosen to do with his platform now that he's made it. Jahmyr didn't just leave his hometown in the rearview mirror to go live in a mansion. He went right back to Dalton, Georgia. When his high school officially retired his number 1 jersey, he used that exact moment of personal glory to shine a bright, glowing light on others. He is now an official ambassador for Family Frameworks, a local organization that mentors over 200 at-risk students every single year across North Georgia. He films motivational videos for them, he donates his own resources, he looks directly into the eyes of kids who are sitting in the exact same plastic chairs he used to sit in. Kids who see their own pain, their own poverty, and their own daily struggles perfectly reflected in his story. It is a powerful, beautiful symmetry. The boy who once desperately depended on his community just to survive is now the man actively building a supportive community for the next generation. Because Jahmyr Gibbs knows better than anyone that home isn't just a physical roof over your head. Home is the people around you. It's about giving others the exact same fighting chance that he was once given. And that is a much bigger victory than any touchdown, any highlight reel, or any headline will ever be. He spent his entire childhood running. He was running away from instability, but he was always running toward hope. He spent his college years running through doubt, but he was always running toward opportunity. And now he runs for the city of Detroit, and he is running straight toward greatness. Jahmyr Gibbs didn't just make it to the NFL. He ran his way there, and in doing so, he found something infinitely greater than professional success. He found himself. If you guys love deep dives into the greatest stories, the untold struggles, and the absolute legends of the sports world, you are in the exact right place. Do me a massive favor and smash that like button. It really helps the channel out more than you know. Make sure to hit subscribe and follow SFL Snap right now. Drop a comment down below and let me know who you want us to cover next. What's an underdog story that needs to be told? Turn on those notifications so you never miss a snap. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.